Hello, everyone. This is Tony Lawson, co-founder and CEO of Shoppe Black. Today, I'm joined by Ms. Nichole Yembra, the founder and managing director of the Chrysalis Company. Chrysalis Company houses Chrysalis Capital, a $15 million African tech fund, and Chrysalis Advisors, a financial investment and strategy firm. Nichole, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks for joining us. So let's get right into
Awesome.
it. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the VC space.
Yeah, so I moved to Nigeria 4.5 years ago, right? Before that, I was with Ernst& Young, and my whole focus was always about process, like I was in risk and PI, and it was about how do you make companies get better from one stage to another, right? And so I spent a lot of time on the people side, on the processes, but never enough on technology. So when I moved to Nigeria, I was like, I want to get the technology piece so I truly know how to transform, businesses end to end. And of course, when you now get into technology, who puts money into tech primarily from like a VC side? And so the company that I joined, CFO of, we ended up raising $20 million. And at the time, in end of 2015, 2016, it was a really big deal. Like no one had really in the tech ecosystem started raising money like that. And so we raised all this money and we're like, there's got to be other companies that do this. The same way we say we need more African exits, we need more African M&A, transactions. So it's like, how do we push and make sure this kind of happens? So we said, okay, let's carve out an investment arm and then just small amount of money and just start putting that into some tech companies that we think are great. Either they're going to go and grow and, other people invest in them, or we acquire them and roll it into our company as we get bigger, but let's do that. And then we ended up investing in, 14 different companies who ended up doing very well. Like our portfolio was like more than 5x the value within 3 years. But it was still very like Nigeria focused. And so before starting Chris, I said I wanted to be more Pan-African. Like I went through the Obama Foundation Africa Leaders class, and we're these like, all of us are tech founders from, 45 different African countries and doing all these things. And I'm like, why are we all building the same company in every single country when if you view this as this one large market, technology is able to scale. Technology, the function of it is to grow across the borders, right? No one says, oh, we need a Facebook for Nigeria or we need a Twitter for Malawi. Like it's the same technology that can scale across, countries and regions. So that's why I like venture, right? Like it's about betting on that future growth, betting on those sustainable technology for me that can go across borders, go across, countries, across emerging markets. And it was a way to just like really catalyze and accelerate growth. And so that was really my big focus on getting into here. So I can do all the stuff I need to do to make the businesses sound, which is what I love. I'm an operator, but we need money, right? Like Africa, the whole continent is getting like 0.1% of venture capital funding. Like you're gonna have to have the money. You can do all the processes and everything you want, but the money is still necessary. So kind of had to get into that space.
Wow. So you mentioned about like creating technology that like can spread across globally pretty much, right? And it's not just Africa specific. So like,
exactly.
Could you speak on how like African startups or African entrepreneurs are basically, out of necessity creating, are solving problems that are Africa focused versus being able to focus on or solve problems that solve global problems?
Yeah. So there's two sides of it. There's problems that are created here, but then like the solutions actually could solve things, in the Western world or elsewhere. So one of the core issues we end up having is like infrastructure, right? So if you wanted to start a business in America, if you went, you could probably go and find a listing of like where you can get your office space. You'd walk in, there's already a connection for light. You just call them and turn on the light, turn on the water, the internet can work. Like there's very little things you have to do here. I generate my own power. We pump our own water. We damn near fix the roads to come to your, so that's a lot of money already right there that you're going to already have to kind of, put in place. Right. Then you now start talking about like, how do I take stuff around regulation? So a lot of the banking regulations, if you're a fintech, are very focused on state by state because a lot of banks were opening physical locations. There was no, regulation that focused on things that can be done over the internet. Like I don't need to have a branch for Flutterwave in, Ondo State because it's literally an app, right? Like, and so now you have regulators saying, oh, is that legal? Can you, and you're like, I don't know, like, I don't think I'm breaking rules because I'm doing this. And now you're educating the regulators on what these things are that are trying to stifle. It's just, it's all of these things. And so now you're just kind of like, okay, what are these pain points? There's just so damn many. And so because there's so many things you have to deal with, from just like people standing in line forever to get money out of banks, or people going to hospitals and there's only, 4 MRI machines like in the whole Lagos state, and you have to stand in line for days, right? Like, how can you not solve for that? How can you say, oh, I want to solve for something that, like, with this little droplet, we map your genetic code, when somebody literally is like, I have a broken leg and I need, this to kind of get here, right? So it does force you to like stifle creativity. But the cool thing is we've now come up with technology that I think is better than some things in other parts of the world. Like the electronic medical records and technology like Helium Health, one portfolio companies has created, is better than EMR systems in the US, which are very billing and insurance driven. This one is quite simply, how does the hospital process flow? Because education levels, right? Because computer literacy is so low, so you have to be simplified, but now it's a superior UI UX to anything that's in the US, and it can actually help manage your facility better. So you had to simplify it because you don't have 1,000, billing codes and insurance companies and whatever, but then you'd end up building a better product.
Interesting. So you just mentioned one of your portfolio companies, Helium.
Yes, Helium Health.
Helium Health. Now, what are
Yes.
other companies that you have under your portfolio?
Yeah, so another one that I absolutely love is Bamboo. So they're investbamboo.com. They came out of the last Y Combinator winter class. And what Bamboo does and why it's been doing really well is that it enabled Nigerians to basically trade on the US stock exchange. So if you're in Nigeria, or know anything about us right now, our currency is up and down, right? And so people that literally had put even $100 in let's say early February, they just didn't even trade. Right. Now that money is bringing them back over 100 Naira difference, right? Like just from sitting their money on this app, because it dollarizes it to trade on the US exchange. So if you're now sitting here like, how do I get dollars? I can't source for dollars. We already know it's hard to get dollars for anything. No problem, put it on the Bamboo app. You literally hold your money in USD for you. You can trade on the exchange. And then in the future, it'll enable people to have access to a bunch of other assets, different exchanges, real estate, a bunch of different other types of assets, right? And so now people are getting into investments, similar to what Robinhood does and all of those things. But as Africans, if you don't have a social security number, you can't trade, right? So there's all of these regulations. So Bamboo sorted through all the regulatory hurdles, sorted through the foreign currency hurdle to literally say, download this app, put money in from local currency, trade on the US exchange, and we'll continue to do more. So the business has grown like crazy in the last 8 months because people are saying Nigeria and these Nigerian assets are not it. And the US stock market is doing crazy, which that's a whole little weird topic about factor of pandemic, but the stock market is very healthy, but we'll have that conversation later. But like, it's something that's now gotten so many people excited. So as a business, you're doing really well. And then also another company called Raise, which is also around securities. And so Raise is trying to tackle and simplify like this whole fundraising process, right? Like, and management, and they're all really big on transparency. They're a huge part of my mini theory of change, that if people understand African businesses, people can see the numbers, people can understand how everything is related to each other, then people would want to put capital and be able, and it makes it easy to put capital from anywhere in the world. So even on the platform, you can execute a safe and it's signed and you know how to wire money. You can see the holdings, you can see the history of the company as an investor. Even if you're doing little angel checks, you can see all of your portfolio into one place and know all the companies you put money into. And there's just all of just facilitating that business. So both of them are securities types companies. One is focusing on like public exchanges, one's focusing on private. I hope one day they come together, but like, it's really like now wealth creation in like the hands of everyday Africans that didn't have a lot of these options before.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
So you've raised, is it 15 million so far?
So what we structured it a little bit differently because good old COVID. So you get commitments, you start warehousing, you do all of those things. So the target is still end at 15, but obviously it's just like phased out over time. And so we have a couple of deals that we're still closing through the rest of this year, but just kind of structuring it over time and just slowly doing deals that way.
Sure. And can you paint a picture of the African startup ecosystem? Like obviously there's many countries in Africa, 54, and not all of them are the same. Could you speak on like what it's like investing in Nigeria versus Ghana versus, you know, South Africa? Who are the major players? Who's getting the most money, et cetera?
So the ecosystem is super exciting, right? Because you have the I guess four main countries that get like 80% of money, which is basically Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt a little bit thrown in there, right? So literally one per region, and they're getting most of the capital. Each of those ecosystems and countries is so vastly different. If you're in East Africa, all the data shows it, is a lot of expats, and by expats I mean like white people that raise money and run startups in East Africa, and they get these valuations and costs and everything is just different. West Africa is very Black and African dominant and like all of that stuff, so it's just different ecosystems completely as well. So investing in one region or another is interesting. Ethiopia is very family business oriented, so they're still not very open to external investors and thinking of cap tables. It's like, it's not cap table, it's a family business. So a lot of stuff is groomed more lifestyle business oriented versus like a venture style business. You're still educating people on what stock ownership means. And I think until more people understand, like some people will go through and want to hold on to 100% of their company, but 100% of $1 million company is cool. But my dude, 10% of $1 billion company is a heck of a lot cooler, right? Like, so how are you educating people on collaboration, on M&A, which is like a big thing I spend time with my portfolio companies. Like Helium has done a couple of acquisitions already because they get that mindset, right, of consolidating the market and just making the pie bigger. But you have to spend time educating people on that, especially across borders, saying, hey, we're coming together. You know, Egypt, I know Nigeria, very similar markets, but there's still some local context. Why don't we come together and be this super company? And then, we take our technology that can scale, but then you customize it for local, right? Yeah. So you're having to figure out these like peculiarities across, and then there's regulation. Some countries are really easy. Some countries are incredibly, incredibly complex. Nigeria is one that is super complex, like, and super ambiguous. Ghana is a heck of a lot better. Kenya is also better. South Africa has done a lot. Like, so just navigating that, as much as you want to consolidate and say, okay, it's 1.2 billion people in this market, there's so many different kind of unique things. But if you make it in Nigeria, I guarantee you can pretty much hack it anywhere else.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
So speaking about funding bias, there was a recent article in Guardian, right? And I think the title was Silicon Valley has deep pockets for African startups if you're African. If you're not African, sorry.
You're not African, yeah.
Because you're like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So like a part of it was like, okay, American venture capital and private equity is dominating Africa, but it's mostly funding other white foreign funders as Black entrepreneurs struggle to raise financing. As a white founder is 47,000% more likely to be funded in Kenya than in the US. What are your thoughts on that and your experience in that?
It's 100% accurate, but there's two levels of that bias, right? There's the one where it says like as a white founder, but the other statistic that we also may not want to talk about with our privilege is as a foreign educated or trained or born even African, right? I wouldn't be in the position of the rooms that I'm in if I wasn't born in Wisconsin, read school in North Carolina, like those that, like, that's still a bias. So even if we start drilling down on the African founders, we counted like out of 200 something companies, over like 85, 90% either were born, lived, schooled, etc. abroad. So if you're truly, truly like, oh, I was born in Africa, you have the tiniest slither of chances of getting that funding because you can't even get in that room. Right? Like that's the problem, is not being able to get in there to be in front of these investors. And I love the VC world, but a lot of VC, it's kind of like sheep. Who else is investing? Go on with your chest. If you like the company, you like the company. Like, why are you waiting to see who else is putting their money in? So if you're just jumping on everything that Andreessen is doing or Sequoia is doing, well, then you're going to continue to fund just that. If you're just jumping on, oh, okay, this one founder was successful, so I'm only going to judge anything that they do. Again, it's people in their network, right? And not everybody all across. So the article is 100% accurate. Like the example I use a lot is the company Life Bank. She's doing really well. She's doing better now, but it took her a long time. And even then, she still has not even a fraction of the funding that Zipline? I'm forgetting the name of their company, but they were using drones basically to like deliver blood and medicine. She's like, I've been doing that. I've been in this market doing it forever, but you guys go and raise, you know, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're over $1 billion company already to do the same thing that she's been doing for years, right? And just all of their investors are all from Silicon Valley. And they said like, oh, built in the Valley, customized for Africa. Like there's something weird on their website. Let me not be throwing shade to this people, but like there's something on their site where you're like, they're not even trying to hide it, right? Like they're really not at all. And they know that for damn sure, they're a lot more comfortable in East Africa because our pride in West Africa is a little, so they know where to go to build that company. So.
Right. That's actually hilarious. So speaking of the public sector versus the private sector, right? So obviously we can't, the private sector can't do everything on its own. We need the public sector to come in and help out. What are the main areas that the public sector needs to come and, you know, make some things happen, make life easier for entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, so I've actually like thought about this extensively and like written about it. Like the main things we need, I'm going to focus on Nigeria because I've seen it start to happen in other African countries and what it does dramatically. So we talk about like identity. So in the US, you have your social security number from pretty much the day you're born, right? And that goes with you, your whole, everything is on there. We don't truly have national ID that is with you from the day you're born to all this stuff. The closest verification we have here is like a bank verification number, but someone can literally go from one place, like you can't really do background checks, like people that claim you can, or check certificates, like all of it's not real because there's no like single ID. Identity allows you to create products for lending. Identity allows you to do stuff for insurance. Identity allows you to truly know how many hospitals or schools or whatever we need because you can count people, right? There's a way to link to this person and they're tracking their whole entire life. We don't have true identity. So does Nigeria really have 200 million people? Heck if we know, right? Like these are numbers. It could be more, it could be less. I don't really have that answer, right? Is it really 1.2 billion in Africa? Maybe. Right. Like some places have started counting, some have not, right? Like we need identity. So that's like super critical for as like, you know, to plug into everything. Two, we need like infrastructure. So I mentioned again, you know, having to generate my own power. And over 58% of places in Nigeria are not even connected to grid at all, 58%, right? The statistic that I thought was like crazy was that I think it was 1 in 4 people in the world without access to electricity is a Nigerian, right? Which is psycho, like psychotic. There's a whole lot of statistics around power, around water, around roads, around all of the basic infrastructure. So I'll give context even in my house. So my friends come and they're like, oh, your house is nice. Like when you compare rents, oh, okay, you're paying $1,500 a month for rent. Okay, that's not bad. You know, what are we paying for power? I'm paying $1,000 a month for power. What are you paying? What are you paying for power? Like let's have that part of the conversation. Actually, no, it's like $1,200 a month. I'm paying for power. You're complaining about your $1,200, like your $120 light bill in your house. I'm paying $1,200 a month. So I was like, so now we have that conversation. Yeah, my rent may be affordable compared to, you know, you in New York, but what am I paying for infrastructure, right? Like literally, these are things you have to think about. Imagine running a business. Like I run, you know, in my office, I have to put solar, I have to connect to the grid, I have to have 2 generators just to make sure we don't have disruptions. I have to pay like all of those things to make something run. So infrastructure is huge. If the government actually invests in that and then people can plug into it, people will pay if it's fair, if it works, right? And that's something that will significantly reduce a lot of the costs and barriers and stuff that people have to deal with. And then the last one is regulation. Regulation should not be stifling. Regulation should not be greedy. Our governments now see that if a business is doing well or a sector is doing well, they come in and clamp a tax on it. I made a comment that I tracked my company last year, 9 months of operations, 18% of my inflows went to the government, not of my outflows, not of, random things, of revenues, of actual cash that came in business, went right back around to some tax structure, anything of a 9-month-old company, right? They don't care. Yeah. And so now they've seen that, oh, Uber and Bolt and all of them have done well. Oh yeah, we're gonna have you give us, 1% or 2% of your revenue, and you have to pay us a fee for these for the cars that are on your platform, and you have to give us your data. What? Like, you weren't providing transportation. Traffic is trash. And yet you're going to see the people doing the work and then try to take over. They put the ban after investors poured tens of millions into companies like Max.ng, which was one of my portfolio companies, Gokata. We put all this money in, and then you're saying, no, they can't. But, turns out Lagos State has their own bikes they want to come out. So, so you used us to prove stuff. That's not regulation. That's just greed and theft. Yeah. But true regulation makes sure that people don't stifle their citizens. True regulation makes sure that it's not harmful to their citizens, right? Real regulation says, hey, fintech and technology is just different. So doing licenses by state no longer makes sense. If you wanted to have a microfinance bank license, you have to deposit like almost $10 million. Who has that, right? But if you go to Ghana, it's like $5,000. Like, it's literally like the same license, just in 2 different countries. Like, that's not regulation, right? Like, that is, if you change that, if you make it better to actually run business, you make it better to like live our life, like all of those types of things, it would dramatically change like the landscape in our country so much. So identity, infrastructure, and regulation.
That would also reduce.
Sorry, I talked a lot, but I'm really
I asked the question for a reason. So, I mean, what I was just about to say was that would actually reduce the brain drain as well. They were basically fostering an environment for entrepreneurs to come up and be supported.
Exactly. Like, SMEs make up like 95% of businesses, only 48% of GDP, but it's like 95% of businesses. Like, you can't keep doing the things that you're doing, and then people feel like, oh, I have to pay this person. Just make the system work. Like, just make the system work for everyone. Like, it's I promise it'll just be better in the long run. But
it's only your job.
Hey, right. Like, and I'm like, you don't go to government to be rich, right? Like, you are supposed to be of the people, for the people, by the, I was like, that's kind of the basis of government. But I think we skipped that part in Africa.
Nigeria specifically.
And apparently in the White House right now too, but we'll skip that.
Shots fired.
Yeah.
So talk about, I know you started Greenhouse Lab, Nigeria's first female founder-focused tech accelerator. Can you talk about why you started that and the importance of supporting, women founders?
Yeah. So when I wrote Lab, actually, it was like my essay for Obama Foundation program, right? It was like, if you had unlimited amounts of money in, 3 months, what would you do? And I was like, I would work with women founders, women in technology, because again, everything is kind of stacked against you. I made the joke that as a Black woman, there's literally nowhere in the world I can go where I'm not a minority, right? Like, so it literally, you go anywhere. And when you look at the tech ecosystem, women's voice is being stifled. While there's 2 sides to this, right? You can fight the system, which will take a long time, but we can't stop. We have to keep doing that. Or you can try to get better and change the mindset of the system. So in the interim, what you can control is yourself. So why don't you become more aware of the questions that investors are going to ask? We already know that investors are more likely to ask, numbers and data-driven questions to female founders trying to trip you up than they are to male founders. No problem. Know your numbers. You already know that they're more likely to phrase questions in a more negative manner about all the risks and things that can go wrong versus positive and the upside when they're speaking to men. No problem. Know all the risks and things that can go wrong and have the answer for that to flip it to the upside, right? You already know, so all of these things that are going to be there. It doesn't mean you will get it. It doesn't mean you will win, but at least be prepared, right? For when you get that chance to have that conversation. So know your numbers, know your business, come better. It sucks that you have to work harder. Like, it is what it is, but until we can change the whole system, you have to adjust, right? And that's just what it was. And so running through this stuff on Lab in 2018 was really amazing. And then, the team continued it after I left, and like they've had another class, and, just continue to grow that. But the female founders I work with, they know, like, I'm like, come correct. Like, we're not going to change everyone's mind right now. Like, we're not. So we're going to keep trying. But until we do, like, the more of you that they meet that are super dope, then they give more women opportunity, right? And then slowly the system will change, but you have to be tight as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So speaking of being tight, what advice do you have for founders, male or female, who are looking to raise money or attract investors? Like what do you look for, and what do investors in general look for? What should these founders be focusing on?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, there's different types of investors, right? I think it's hilarious to be like, oh, you have a fund. I have this idea. And I'm like, do you know anything about what I invest in? Do you know anything about my mandate? Do you know anything about what I like? Like, you can't just say, oh, someone has money. Come on, give me money. Like, it's a marriage. You're in it for several years. So you need to make sure that you're aligned, right? So the first thing to do is even just like doing research to know, do they like my sector? Like, if you were coming to me and you had an e-commerce business, like, you've already just messed up, because I hate e-commerce. I love Amazon. It's like my favorite company in the world. But e-commerce in Africa, can't stand it. Like, because no one does it well. So no one does it well. So I don't even bother with e-commerce. So like, don't come to me with your e-commerce business, because I'm not gonna be interested in it. So like, already save yourself the heartache, right? So show that you've done that part of the work. But different investors are like different things. Some like the story, some like the great vision. I mean, all the people that bought into the We company, oh, that it sounded sexy, right? Like, Adam was in there with his hair and his set talking about like transforming people's lives. And like, yeah, if you came to me, I'd have been like, use it. I'm not trying to hear all that. So me as Nichole, I'm like, I'm a numbers person. I want to see data. I want to see something that's well researched, and I'm super, super big on transparency. I have this joke in common. I tell my team all the time. I'm like, I can literally hand you the blueprint of how I do something, and I guarantee you still won't do it better. I mean, like, I can literally give you my entire work plan. I can give you like, this plus this should equal this, but I promise when it's equal, it won't equal what I've done. So I actually have no problem showing all of that. So I'm like, what are you hiding? Yeah. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I guarantee you there's someone in Bangladesh, someone in Colombia that had the same idea, and I work like, I promise you, God just sprinkles it all, right? Everywhere the ideas are there. It's really now, can you make that thing come to life? Can you put the structure behind it? Can you get people to believe in you? Can you get people to want to work with you, right? Can you get people to buy into that? Like, are you willing to do the boring shit every single day to bring that thing that's me. Yeah. I don't need your crazy big idea. I don't need, and I have to remind people too, like, yeah, VC wants that 100x exit, my dude, all I gotta do is cross over the 4x threshold. Like, I just need you to be sustainable and go through here. So you really don't have to tell me that, oh yeah, this about to be $1 billion. Cool, that's great. But you have to show me that it can work. You have to show me that 1,000 people want to buy it, and then another 1,000, and then whatever that is, right? Like, so different types of investors. So if you come to me and you're telling stories, you may be telling the truth, but I'm already put off. That's me. But I think overall, investors want to know, like, that you've done the work, that you understand the sector, that you've achieved some insight that someone else hasn't, or whatever that thing is, right? Have that. But I would just say, just save yourself and even know who you're pitching to and what they want and whether it even aligns.
Wow, great advice. Nichole, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for dropping gems. Thank you for all the shade that was thrown also. Appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.